Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the RC chat. Um, this month's chat is about when love hurts, and our guest speaker isn't able to connect as of yet. So we're praying that she's able to connect at some point. But, we want to get started with the information that we do have about domestic violence. Again, this is the Renaissance Center, and we welcome you to this program. Before we get started, I want to let you know that the Renaissance Center is offering free counseling sessions for Baltimore City and Baltimore County residents. You can access those free sessions by calling 410-409-0025. Again, this is Dr. Carla Debnam, and welcome. So we want to get started with this conversation between me and you. So now it's a conversation between me and you. So make sure you put in the chat any questions you may have, on Facebook or YouTube. Just make sure you get those questions out there, because domestic violence, intimate partner violence is something we cannot ignore. And you've heard me say this before, that we have a lot of family secrets. We are proud of what goes on in this house, stays in this house, but it's really been hurting us, as a culture. It is not just women that are affected by this, but men as well. We know domestic and family violence involves everyone in the family and goes across age demographics. So some of what we are seeing in the culture is nothing new. It's just that we're hearing more about it as people come forward, sharing their stories. So we will get started. So domestic violence, what is it? Anybody can be an abuser. First of all, we have, this mindset that, people can have to look a certain way, be from a certain background, but domestic violence abusers are across every socioeconomic status and every racial, ethnic, and religious background. So there is no profile of a person that would participate in this as an abuser. So, you might have your own preconceived notions of who this person may be. Again, it's male or female, and it's across every background. So when you drop those stereotypes, it helps you to kind of be more open when it's happening in your home or in your family. Because a lot of times in our families, we're like, oh, not my family, not my loved one. This person, is a CEO, or they're a pastor, or they're a football coach, or they teach ballet. These people certainly couldn't be perpetrators of intimate partner violence, but they are. So keep that in mind. So drop that preconceived notion of who is the abuser. It can be, of course, I said, different professions. It could be a family friend. It could be a teacher. It could be someone that you trust. And usually it is someone you've trusted. And that's how they get so close to you. And that's what makes it difficult to even acknowledge that you are in an abusive relationship, because you're close to these people. You love these people. You respect them. At some point, the relationship didn't, have any indication sometimes that it was headed in this direction where it would be hurtful and harmful. So that's that's the norm. So if this is you, if you're a person that's in a relationship that is hurtful and harmful, it's not anyone's fault. It's not your fault. You didn't make this happen to you. This is, something that we just have to deal with. And if possible, be able to overcome it. And sometimes counseling works for people that may be having these struggles. And sometimes, it's ways to overcome it. And you might have to separate, but we'll discuss that a little bit later, because that can sometimes be difficult for persons or add to their stress. So we want people to stay safe in this environment. So what are some of the signs of an abusive relationship? It could be, things that seem like it's a sign of affection or love, or the person is real attentive. So they could be, calling you or texting you several times a day. And you're like, oh, this is nice. We're always in touch. This means that the person really cares about me and wants just to stay in contact. But sometimes that escalates to the kinds of questions that could seem come out of nowhere. Well, where are you? Well, what's going on? And it's taking too long for you to get home, or just different things. And in the beginning, or for some people, those are just normal conversations or signs of concern, just making sure you're okay. But that could just be the start for people that are abusers, the start of some of the habits that could lead to further escalation. Escalation could look like stalking. People, have reported that, they broke it off with someone, right? But then the person followed them. They were at their church. They saw them when they got off work. The person they were close to knows what grocery stores they shop in. So they would be at the grocery store, or they would just be at random places that this person would frequent, and they were not invited there. And it can become habitual. So what seems like attention and is something that, we might like in the beginning, can be escalated to too much contact, to then stalking, but also to verbal abuse. It's different kinds of abuse. And, I'll be dropping these different kinds of abuse out here because there are some things that we hadn't considered abusive, that this is just the way the person is. They're just hot tempered, so that's just how they communicate. And we've had people actually say, well, that's just how I talk, but it could be intimidating or threatening to the other person. So even if that's how you normally communicate, if the person says, hey, that I really don't like that, that makes me uncomfortable, that's something for us to look at. If our loved one, our friend, family member, coworker is expressing that to us, it's just hopefully something for us to look at so it won't escalate. So verbal abuse is a form of domestic violence because, we said that growing up, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words can never hurt me. It's not true. Words, people remember words. Those words are seared into your mind, your neural pathways that keep bringing that thing back to your remembrance. Like, wow, I can't believe they said that to me. Wow, I can't believe that, that happened. And so it can be considered domestic violence because it can include threats, right? Verbal abuse can include threats. It can be calling people out of their names. Domestic violence can, verbal abuse can be calling people out of their names, threats. It can be turn into emotional abuse where you tell people, hey, you'll never be nothing. You were nothing until I met you. Um, you know, you can't be anybody you want to be. Nobody will want you. Until you met me, you were, weren't that desirable. I helped you get where you are. These are things that where verbal abuse can turn into emotional abuse because you're really targeting the person, um, where it hurts. Might know their vulnerabilities and you use that against them. Well, where would you be without me? Just so many phrases that sometimes we say in anger. So let's differentiate that. Angry words that we say out of occasionally or once because someone pushed our buttons is different from abuse, because abuse is something that's habitual. This is what you always say. You always call the person out of their name when you're upset. You always go to that uh, sensitive spot that person has and brings that up against them. So those are some of what the verbal abuse can look like. I'm fielding some questions, so if you have questions, put them out there, but I'm going to put some other information in as I'm fielding the questions. What do you call it when your older siblings abuse you? It's still it's family abuse. So if your older siblings are calling you out of your name, if they're always saying negative things about you or using, again, a sensitive area, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, but if you have, well, I'm going to say if you have blended families, or how some of us have been raised by our aunts and uncles and we're not their biological child, and so but they have biological children, and so sometimes people can say, well, you're not even blood, or you're just a cousin, you're not my real sister, things like that. So sometimes people in a family can be abusive towards one another and use, again, those sensitive spots and spaces to use them to, again, someone says, is abuse a form of control? Yeah, control is a form of abuse. So this is how people control you. They control you sometimes with their words. They control you with your ability to move around. And what I mean by that, where you can go, how long you can stay someplace when you do go, who you go with. You can go to the restaurant, but you can't go with Jane because I don't like Jane. But it's okay if you go with Janet. Janet's cool with me. And if you go with Janet, you can only stay an hour and a half, and I need you back home by 8. Right. And it's not because they feel you're not safe or any of that. It is about control. So control is another form of that abusers use because it helps them stay in power. So again, it's power and control. That's what it's all about. It's about maintaining power over a person. And so words are a form of control. Movement, are a form of control. It can be abusive. It's not just because they want to make sure you're okay, that you get to where you were going. And we do this. This is common practice to say, hey, I made it to the movie theater. I'm on my way home. So, so these are some normal practices, but can get out of hand and for certain people and be used as a means of control. And that's hard to tease out, when you're that person that's feeling like, well, maybe this is too much, questioning or too much happening to show up at the same grocery store. Or maybe, you might brush it off at first, but if it makes you feel uncomfortable and you don't want it, and you even ask the person, hey, I'll let you know where I am, or whatever it may be, and they don't honor your request, then that can become uncomfortable. And you have to go with your gut. If you don't feel comfortable about something, it's okay to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable, and put boundaries in place if possible. It's tough when you live with people, the people that are abusive. It's tougher. But if it's external people, you can do some things. And of course, we know you can do some more things, legally, if it gets out of hand. So controllers is a part of abuse. And we have to realize that some people, right, are, in our lives, and they may see things that we don't see about our relationships in our families. Again, it's not just men against women. It's young people against old people. So that's elder abuse. And I know domestic violence usually focuses on couples, but we have family violence, where intergenerational abuse is going on. People abusing their aunts or grandparents, or the grandparents are abusing the grandchildren. These things are secrets that we can no longer keep. So what are some of the common traits that abusers have? Some abusers may have low self-esteem, feel powerless or ineffective, maybe in their world, their work world, or even in their family of origin. They might have been picked on, and now they found someone else, that they can have power control over. The abuser blames the victim, blames the person. Well, I wouldn't call you out of your name if you did this, or I wouldn't have had to show up at the church if you had come straight home after service. Things that, we might take for granted, but for an abuser, these things are some segues into being, more controlling. An abuser may be pleasant, charming, in between the assaults. So in between, if it's physical assault, in between if it's verbal abuse, in between if it is sexual violence, which can occur, as a form of abuse, when no means no, even if you're married. So no means no. So these are some of the things that we've grown accustomed to, not all of us, but that are not healthy and are not right, that are abusive, basically. One of the questions is, do you think domestic violence can impact the children's belief of gender roles, worth, and self-esteem? I think domestic violence can impact every aspect of a person's life, including their view of gender roles. So if, boys see the male figures in their home or in their life, being verbally abusive or calling their mate out of their names, they may grow up saying, well, that's how we interact with other young people in my age group. I'm going to call them out of their names. Or girls may feel like, hey, it's okay to cuss and fuss or cuss your husband out because mommy cussed daddy out, so I'm gonna cuss my husband out, when I grow up. That's how we relate. We just cuss and fuss. So yes, it can affect how our children grow up and see their role in a person's life. And that's why we need to put an end to this as well, because it is really, harming our children. So don't forget, there is a hotline too that you can call or text. You can go to the hotline.org if you are needing any more assistance. And then you can always call 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. And they will get you to where you need to go. There are local places, in our area that help out. The House of Ruth, Turnaround. These are some places that help people that are going through these situations. Normally, primarily women, but there are some safe places for men as well. It says, do you think law enforcement officers are still not taking domestic violence seriously? I think they are taking it seriously. It's just that this is what sometimes happens is once they get to the home, the people that call in the incident usually sometimes say, oh, we're okay. It's okay. I'm good. I don't want, to take this any further. So I believe that they are responding, from what I hear from, some people, that they are getting a response. But again, a lot of it is once they get there, sometimes the people, out of fear, they don't want the police involved sometimes. So they may back down on it, even if they were the ones to call. So, I think, we have to look at both sides. It's not always evident that something is happening. Remember, we have verbal abuse, emotional abuse. We also have financial abuse. Financial abuse is when you're withholding resources. So, the checks come in maybe to one account, and you're given an allowance, and that's fine, because sometimes that's what families do. I get it 200, you get 200, and then to spend the way we want, and the rest of it goes on bills. But this is a little bit more, it's trickier. It's like you get only enough for lunch, or you can only spend $20 on gas. So that means that you can't, your mobility could be limited, because I only have $20 for gas. That's going to only get me back and forth to work. And that means I can't go visit people or do any other things. So sometimes the financial abuse is real specific like that. There's medical abuse. I know sometimes we say medical abuse where, people aren't able to pay their co-pays. And so that's withholding access to medical care that you could help your loved one with, especially if it's your spouse or your child, even as far as having them covered under your insurance would help provide them the services they need. But some people withhold that. And some of this is generational. It's the way people were brought up. This is how their families functioned. I do my thing, you do your thing. But it sometimes can turn into something harmful when you doing your thing has limited my access to health care or to being able to get to a job interview because I can't go further than my $20 takes me. This is what financial abuse looks like. So we're used to seeing the big things, the acts of violence, the beatings, those things are more outwardly focused. So we see those, but the financial abuse, medical abuse, things we don't see, where we just do, we can overlook those because we don't see them. And part of the challenge is getting the rest of us, the community, to support persons when they are going through these challenging, abusive situations, because we might think it's easy to get out of, but it's not necessarily so. The most dangerous time for a person to leave an abusive relationship, that's their most dangerous time. So once they decide to go and make actions to go, that's when their life is most in danger. So when we as support persons are encouraging people to do what they need to do, we need to support them in coming up with a plan, an exit plan, a safe way to get out of harm's way. And that's even if it's verbal abuse, if it's power and control, if it's stalking or semi-stalking, if it's financial abuse, if it's emotional abuse, the name calling. Oh, I'm gonna just leave. People that threaten to leave, some people say this to their loved ones like every other day. Well, I'm gonna just leave. Well, I'm gonna just leave. Why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave? That's emotional abuse. You can't keep telling people to leave or say it, threatening them that you're going to leave. That's a scar. And people are like, wow, are they going to leave? Is this the day they're going to leave? Is this the day they're going to tell me to leave? Am I going to come home and everything's going to be gone from my house because they told me they were leaving, but they said it for 20 years and never did it. And this time they did. So you keep people, that's power and control. You leave, I'm gonna leave. Somebody's gonna leave. But if you say it every day, it wears away at a person's emotions and self-esteem. It says, what are some ways the victims and perpetrators of domestic violence deal with the guilt and shame of the violence they have experienced? Well, some of that guilt and shame that, we may have as a result of our experiences with domestic violence, or even being a loved one that was trying to support somebody and we feel like we didn't do enough, we didn't step in enough time to help them. We can just look at the reality that a lot of times people that are in these situations hide behind the abuse. So we don't really know sometimes what people are going through. They only let us in on a little bit. And so if you've been that person that's been abused, then it's nothing to be ashamed about. But it does take time to kind of recognize, wow, how did I get here? And that's where therapy comes in, or joining a support group of other survivors, people that are on the other side or working to get to the other side of being healthy. So it's something you have to be intentional about and work towards, and really surround yourself with a different group of people or your loved ones that were supportive of you along the way. Keep them on board and, pull on them, because they were there for you throughout, and they'll be there for you as you regain your footing. Because abuse is, it'll just, you'll be like, why did I stay so long? What's going on with me that I get attracted to these kind of people over and over again? And so those are things you can kind of walk through in therapy, because it's hard sometimes. These answers don't like come to your head right away, like, oh, I'm this way because of my family upbringing. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. Or we saw it in our families, maybe our parents, like I said, cussed each other out every day. these are the ways some people are growing up or have grown up. Um, and so it's not anything to be ashamed of because it's what we saw. We thought this was love. Um, and, you know, we now know it's not. And so that's what I would say. Just find your people, find a group. There are plenty of groups out here that help survivors of domestic and intimate partner violence. Um, so I think somebody asked a question. Let's okay, more about elder abuse. So elder abuse, again, can be similar as abuse. It's taking advantage of people financially. So even with domestic violence, it's like, say if you know persons have, you know, resources and you want to tap into them and you ask them, you know, all the time to bail you out, that can keep be abusive at some point, especially for elders, because they want to help people and normally, and they'll give you their last. And so sometimes people say, you know, they'll drop out their grandma's house or their aunt's house or their uncle's house and say, you know, I need $20 more for gas. Or they'll say, I have my cell phone bill, or can you put it in your name? Because mine, you know, is bill is running too high and I'll pay you back. And so a lot of elders get abused financially, get taken advantage of. So they might get people, uh, again, by, you know, releasing their income to people, or just, you know, unknowingly trusting their family, friends, or other people in authority. So it could be their best friend that's asking for money. So usually it's money scams for elders. Now there are also people that, you know, physically abuse elders and do the name calling with the emotional abuse. So that's not unusual, and that's when we need to call, again, adult protective services. And, you know, that's anonymous. So you can call in if you think an elder that you know or in your family is being abused. And it's so many other ways, you know, not taking care of them. So just like for children, so with elders, they can be neglect, where they're not being cared for properly, not, you know, feeding them in a timely fashion, especially if they are vulnerable adults. So you have to look at the situation for the elder abuse, and it can just be in different forms. And you know, I knew of a older person whose child was addicted to drugs, and so the child would often ask them to, you know, bail them out or, you know, help them in different ways, but it wasn't for what they said it was for. It was for, you know, the drug addiction, but they hid it from the rest of the siblings and family. So it was their secret. And, you know, that's how some elders can be abused too. Is they have secrets with certain parts of the family, and the family doesn't know that they're actually being abused. Emotional abuse is what I said, the name calling, the withholding of love and affection. So if you regularly, uh, give people the silent treatment, uh, some of us grew up in emotionally withholding families. So meaning, you know, we don't hug, we don't say I love you, we don't say thank you, we don't say you're welcome. You know, there's kind of no signs of life almost. And for some people, that can become emotionally abusive. You may be used to it. This is how you grew up. And that can be, your reasoning. But some people need, reassurance. They want to know you're okay. So with withholding, it can be emotionally abusive. Again, the name calling, the threats, I'm going to leave, you're no good, nobody wants you, or you need to leave, I'm packing up. These things are emotional abuse. So anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, like, wow, I can't believe they said that. But, we all get a wow because we all say things that could be, not nice or emotionally charging to the other person. But think about it this way: if it's all the time, if I got to hear this every week that you leaving me, oh my goodness, that's a lot. That's a lot for a person to bear. And so they're doing everything they can to figure out, well, how can I get this person not to leave me? What can I do? So that's control. That's the abuse part. Like, they control you by threatening to leave. And then you try to figure out how to do everything you can to get them to stay. Or they withhold affection, the silent treatment for not just a day or two, but some people go for weeks and months. That's abusive. So it's subtle. So that's why, it's not the outward things, it's some of the inward abuse. And we won't understand it. Oh, that was a good relationship. He was a good man. She was a good woman. But we don't know, what they were living with. Let's see if some more warning signs of abusers. Extreme jealousy. Like I said in the beginning, it's cute because it's like, oh, they really love me. They don't, they just want me to themselves. Okay, in the beginning, that might seem, pretty good in the beginning, but extreme jealousy, you can't, or in isolation. These people will, you'll end up with no friends. You won't be able to go see your family. I don't like your family. I don't like none of your family. They don't like me. So you're saying I can't go see my family? No, nope. If you love me and they don't love who you love, then why would you go visit them? So see, the words, possessiveness, again, your mind, we have to be together, uh, even to the exclusion, sometimes, again, from other family members, or even people may get remarried and the new marriage partner doesn't want their partner to have anything to do with their previous family. So that's some possessiveness, some isolation, a bad temper, cruelty to animals. Something's not right there. Cruelty to animals is a sign for a lot of different situations. So if you're dealing with somebody that's cruel to animals, believe me, they're going to be cruel to you. Verbal abuse, roles, traditional roles that they feel that women or men should play, that they grew up on, that sometimes have changed in different situations and in different, areas. So it's what may be abusive in some cultures, it could be normal. We might see them as abusive, could be normal for other cultures, but anything in excess, it can become abusive. So even if it's normal for me to sit in the back seat while the men sit in the front seat, and I'm cool with that because that's what we do. That's what my culture does. But if it becomes where, I'm threatened and I have to sit in the back seat because if I don't, harm will come to me. These are the kinds of things you have to kind of tease out. So everything that is done could be, culturally sensitive to what people grow up with. That's their cultural norm. But it's when the threats come, when the harm is potential for somebody to be there. Blaming the victim that anything that goes wrong is their fault. So we know people that do that. Everything is somebody else's fault, even if it's not. So this is why it takes a long time for victims and survivors to kind of, overcome it, because they've been told, I wouldn't beat you if you didn't cause me to. I wouldn't cuss you out. I wouldn't give you the silent treatment. I wouldn't withhold money. I wouldn't withhold affection, but you forced me to do it. So these are some of the things. Again, controlling all of the finances. So it's okay to have your family account where you pay the bills and everybody has their spending money. But if, like I said, you can only get $20 and anything over that is it might be a big deal. Harassment at work. You're showing up at people's jobs unannounced or call them all day on their work phone. If you can't reach them on their cell, because we know a lot of cell phones you can't use at your job. So people will call you on your work phone all day. It's just subtle things. But again, if you feel uncomfortable about your interactions with someone, don't, take it on the chin. It may be something for you to look at. Do you want to continue down this path? Do we need an intervention? Everything doesn't mean you have to break up, but some things, people, it's hard for them to overcome some of these habits because they're ingrained in them. And if they're not willing to get help, but you are, sometimes it's hard to kind of bridge that gap. So is there hope for the abuser? It's hope. I'm in hope for everybody, but you have to want to change. Again, remember, some of the abusers blame their victims. They say it's your fault. I wouldn't beat you if you came home at 8:00, but you came home at 8:05. So that's your fault, or dinner wasn't ready, or dinner wasn't hot, or dinner was too cold, or the children weren't clean, their hair wasn't combed. You didn't dress the way I want you to dress, right? You don't you don't look like you used to. Just, it's a lot of different subtle things. So there's hope, but they have programs specifically for men. And in this case, because most intimate partner violence is men against women, so they do have programs for men to help them overcome. And it's bigger than anger. This is not just anger. It's we all, again, say things, may have anger, about certain things, but this is bigger than anger. So that's what I really want you to look at. This is a pattern of behavior. If you're being harassed, if you're being stalked, demeaning, whether it's publicly or privately, you feel like you don't belong, the person's, is sharing that with you. These are, again, the subtle forms of domestic abuse and violence. Victim blaming. We do that as a culture. Why don't they just leave? Well, it's not that simple. They may have children. Again, some people's finances have been tied up, so they have to figure out how to untie those, get some finances in order to leave, get a place to live. And again, who's taking in whole families sometimes, so it becomes difficult. Plus, there has to be, a place to go. You have to plan. You have to make sure you're safe and that your children, if you have children, are safe. So you can't just say it's their fault, if we're on the outside looking in. We have to figure out what can we do to support this person. We can't just be bystanders and blame those that we see. What can we do? We can do something by not joking about domestic violence. We've seen these elevator photos of people, you know, hurting one another. We've seen them, you know, of public figures in particular, or, you know, out, you know, in a public setting, whether they're at a party, you know, things get out of hand. So we've seen these things and we laugh them off, but these are real people with real troubles. And just like our family and friends, we have to take this seriously. This isn't something, you know, to laugh off. And we need to support, you know, abusers in their choice to be rehabilitated, you know, to get a fresh and new mindset, because it's going to take that if they want to change. And of course, with the person that suffered at the hands of an abuser, they have to get in a healing season. So, and that could be, you know, a lot of different things. We know people can form PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of being in abuse, and, you know, have different, you know, traumatic, you know, have dreams and triggers that can set them off, you know, for a while. So that's again why treatment is necessary for some people. Talk about how domestic violence continues from generation to generation. Again, it's sometimes what we've seen growing up. So, and we just mimic what we see. This is how relationships are handled, you know, whether it's we cuss each other out all the time, we withhold emotionally, we never hug or say I love you or anything like that. You know, we throw shoes at one another, we beat each other up. So this is not gender related. This can happen, you know, no matter what gender you are. So we just have to make sure that if we don't want it to be continued generationally, that we start, you know, showing some healthy relationships. And we had that on like a couple months ago about healthy relationships, what healthy looks like. And that's what we can start modeling in our homes, so that our children or nieces and nephews, you know, they don't have to continue in a way that, you know, they've seen the adults in their life, you know, act out. And a lot of this starts when people are young, as teenagers. So remember, people aren't just doing this in a vacuum. They're learning this as young people. So, and then they're putting it into practice in their relationships as adults. So, what should we say to someone who you think is a victim of domestic family violence that will help them keep the dialogue going, right? Because we don't want them to shut down if they're open to us. But it's difficult. So some of it is, hey, you know, just having a normal conversation. I'm just checking in on you, making sure everything's cool. How's the family? So, you know, you're asking, you know, generic questions about their well-being overall, and sometimes not specifically about their situation. But you can ask them, if you're really close to them, you know, outright, you know, how's it going? Are you all still arguing, right? Has it gotten out, you know, worse or better? Because if you think they are going through something, they may have already shared with you some of it, so you can just kind of do follow up and not and just be supportive and say, hey, I'm here. If you need, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I just, being there and knowing that there's somebody that's not judging them for still being in the relationship, but supporting them as they determine what they should do next, because it's difficult. People love one another, so it's not like they're showing their love in ways that aren't healthy. But that's why it's hard for people to leave too, because they have love and affection for the person that is abusing them, and so it's not as easy as just get up and go. So why does domestic violence increase during major sporting events? Because alcohol is involved, right? So with these major sporting events, we're celebrating. Some people are drinking and eating, and their adrenaline is up because they are cheering on their team, right? But say, what if the team loses? And some people are really invested in sports in the way that can be unhealthy, right? So I'm drunk. I am angry that my team lost, and now I'm going to take it out on my loved ones. So again, these are triggers. So maybe this is something we could discuss with the person. Hey, look, every time your team loses, you lose control. This isn't acceptable. If you can have a conversation with the person while they're sober. But again, some of this is alcohol related or substance abuse related, where this is when some people abuse more when they're under the influence. So that's when the beatings increase, or the cussing, fussing, the distancing happens when people are under the influence. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing I left out, that alcohol is involved in or drugs in some of these interactions. How do you balance getting involved with staying out of other people's business? Well, we're in people's business. They put it out there somehow or another. So we can pick up and kind of, hey, I saw this or that, especially if they're posting on social media or they say little things. Hey, I noticed the other day you had to get off the phone real quick. What's going on? So that's our challenge. Our culture stays in people's business, and then we pride ourselves on not staying in people's business. So this is the kind of business we need to be about, not just nosy for no reason. But if you're concerned, just say, I'm concerned. You don't have to say, oh, I'm fearful for you, and shut the person down. I think we should just say we're concerned, and we just have a question to ask. And it could be that we could be rejected for showing support, but if you feel on your heart that's the thing to do, then that's what you do. I'd rather bring up this tough situation with a friend or family member and lose them talking to me than to wish I had said something and didn't. So that's how you have to look at it. And again, you're saying it as a support system, not to judge or condemn. And people know the difference. So be that person that can support and lead them to healing, and not judge or condemn. And then that way they'll open up and be able to share more. So that's some of it. This is tough, y'all, having a chat with myself and you all, though. So I thank God that you all are hanging in here with me. on this difficult subject. And I've just really touched the tip of the iceberg on this. So I might have to do some more later when my guest, reappears or reconnects with us. But I do appreciate you all hanging in there with me. Why would God allow a child to grow up in a violent family? Well, God allowed, we all grow up in different and difficult families, to be honest. So our placement in a violent family, I think God knows, and it's not that God doesn't care, that we have free will, right? So the free will in us takes over and we become sometimes these persons, or it's generational. And this has been going on since the beginning of time. And so it doesn't make it right. And I'm not saying I can't try to get God off the hook, but remember, it's people that are hurting people. It's people hurting people. So we need to somehow get to those people so that they can, stop that. This will be my last question, and we'll close out. Can you please touch on teen intimate partner violence? It's dating violence. It starts young. Again, it starts with the stalking or the increased text messages. It starts with, when people have exclusive relationships early on in the dating, as teens. And the isolation, they can't be around their friends. So similar to adult issues. So it's the signs are, maybe they're losing their friends that they used to have. They can only go out with this person or go out with this person and their friends, but not the friends they used to have. They can't hang with them anymore. They may quit, sports or anything that they were interested in before being with this person. So now their interests have changed. And I would just say, keep the lines of communication open and just say, hey, I noticed that you don't hang out with Jonathan anymore. What's going on? I know you and Jane are getting really close. What happened to your other friends that you used to hang out with? So it's just different ways to keep the communication open. If we're going to support persons on their journey to healing, we have to try to keep the communication going as a support person. And we will get into teen dating violence a little more. That's a whole separate thing, but it is a part of intimate partner violence and family violence. So there's so many parts to it. Our hour is up, and I will have to do a part 2 on this when my guest shows back up. So again, the Renaissance Center is offering us free sessions. Well, not offering us, we're offering free sessions. You can call it 410-409-0025. Hopefully this has helped. I know I touched the tip of the iceberg. Again, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You can go to the website. Let's see, what's the website? ncadv.org. ncadv.org. It's other institutes as well, House of Ruth, Turnaround. So these are some organizations that can give you more support and information. Thanks for being with us tonight.